Hello, BookTube, and welcome back to BookTube at War. This is a July BookTube event making its debut in 2023 that's dedicated to military literature, war-related literature of any kind, romance, science fiction, fantasy, history, poetry, fiction. I do a lot of this kind of reading anyway, so I'm embracing BookTube at War, and I was prompted to the reading that I did last night by a book that I recently found. I recently found a hardcover of a great old, once upon a time standard history of the War of 1812. And I didn't have it. I've had it from time to time. I loved it and recommended it forever and ever when it was the greatest work on the subject. And I reread a chunk of it and really enjoyed it. But it kept reminding me of what I consider to be the greatest work on the subject now. People come along periodically for the War of 1812, call it forgotten, and then write about it. And that's this, George Doggin's book, 1812, The Navy's War. Big, thick thing. I think the longest popular history ever written about the War of 1812, and in my opinion, the best. So I went back to this for BookTube at War and just gave it a reread and loved it. Oh, this guy is so good. He's just so good at writing naval history. This book, and he also wrote a book called Two If by Sea. I recommend both of them just wholeheartedly. This is thematically, maybe in terms of like a neat beginning, a neat middle, and a neat ending, and a lot of neat themes. It's a little bit messy as a war, not as messy as some of the colonial era wars that I've been talking about at BookTube at War, but still pretty messy. You have to know it really well and pay attention to every little detail in order to write a narrative as convincing and enjoyable as this one. It's full of big personalities. And some of those personalities aren't human. Some of those personalities are the wind-driven wooden vessels that had their last great heyday right around this time. Certainly their last great heyday in American wars was right around this time. The world was very soon, in a generation, going to change completely, and this kind of fighting was going to disappear. Always an interesting, somewhat melancholy thing when that happens. You'd prefer, of course, as a sensible human being, you'd prefer that all types of fighting disappear, but when it comes to wind-driven vessels with cannonades like that on the sides, broadsides firing into each other. It's been romanticized so heavily, in fiction especially, but even in nonfiction, that it's hard to read accounts like this. Doggin resists sentimentality as much as any writer does with the War of 1812, but he can't resist it completely. And it's hard to read accounts like this and not think on some level that this kind of naval combat was more conducive to personal heroism than was, for instance, naval battles of World War I. The great signature naval battle of World War I, the combatants barely even saw each other. It was conducted entirely from enormous distances apart. Still plenty of arena for heroism, but this captures not only the people and the ships and the politics, but also, I don't know, some fading something about the time. Doggin is a very sensitive writer to the broader time periods, periodic tables of the things he's writing about. And I don't know if I'm describing it well, but I really like his sentimentality. I like his approach as a historian, I guess is what I'm trying to say. It takes all types. Historians have all sorts of different approaches to their subject matter. But I like this historian's approach. I like the writing tone that he adopts. I was very happy to go back to this thing. The War of 1812, I guess, is turning into the war that I'm concentrating on for BookTube at War, which is not at all what I was expecting. I don't think that will stay true. We've still got a week. I've still got at least 7 books to do before BookTube at War ends for 2023, so I might not go back to the War of 1812, although given what happened, my book purchasing today, I very well might. But in the meantime, my field report for today is a wholehearted positive. I don't know if 1812 ever came out in trade paperback. I'm assuming that it did. It's a major publisher. And I have no idea if Doggin has ever had a blurb by me on any of his books. But if you see this, if you see a hardcover at your, your library sale or a yard sale, something or other, and you're in any way interested, especially if you're an American, grab it. Absolutely grab it. So that's your field report for today. Nice and quick. The Doggin's War of 1812. I was driven to it by a recent book purchase. That's the way things go when you've got BookTube events. For me, they sometimes definitely exercise a sway over what I'm buying and even what I'm reading. So I will wrap this up for now. Nice and quick field report, but I'll be back with tonight's reading. I'll be back next time. Thank you, BookTube.